Fox Business Alert now. The Labor Department's changing the rules, and in doing so, possibly getting a lot more people to save for retirement. The change allowing employers to sign workers up automatically. Would you like that for 401ks? Shabani Joshi explains to us exactly why and how the changes were made. Shabani.
Hi, David. Well, the days of showing up to your first day at a new job and spending the entire time filling out paperwork just got a little bit easier. At least one form less, which is good news for a lot of people out there. That's because the Department of Labor announced that it is giving a green light to companies to automatically enroll employees in employer 401k plans. You know, many people and many employers were concerned about the legal liabilities associated with automatically deducting funds from an individual's or an employee's paycheck. But this regulation gives the power to employers to do just that. And it also gives them some guidance on how to invest their money and put those automatically deducted funds to use. It's earmarked specifically 3 funds from which your employer is supposed to target your funds to. The first is a balance fund, another one is a professionally managed account, and the other one is a target date retirement fund, which basically creeps up as you get older. And an interesting twist here, an alternative that you can also opt into, is that you can put your money into a money market account for at least 120 days. You know, the Labor Department estimates that this change is going to bring in between $70 to $130 billion of retirement funds in the next 27 years because of this automatic enrollment. You know, a lot of people saying this is good news for the average American out there. People are going to have retirement money when they may not have originally. But the downside and the naysayers out there saying, you know what, this is evidence of a nanny state and too much intervention in people's business. So, you know, some progressive and some interesting changes from the Department of Labor today. Back to you, David.
All right, Shabani, thanks. It's a little spooky, though, to have your employer do it automatically. You know what I mean?
Did it right here with me.
I don't know. It's just kind of, I like to make those decisions myself.
Except that you've got a situation, we're going to talk exactly about how this rule will affect you, that where people, there's a 0 savings rate in this country right now.
I understand.
Even sometimes negative, so.
But still, it's my cash. I feel a little nervous about somebody else handling it.
Not so much.
All right. Well, we're going to throw that to our panel. We have with us now Pat Powell of Powell Financial Group.
Charles Payne, Fox Business contributor.
And Peter Schiff of Euro Pacific Capital. And Peter, let's start with you if we can. Am I being a little too finicky, wanting to control all this by myself?
Well, I mean, I think anything that would encourage Americans to save more would be a positive. You know, unfortunately, you know, most Americans are struggling to live paycheck to paycheck. The cost of living is rising at unprecedented rates per year. So most Americans can just barely make ends meet. You know, they've been relying on home equity. They falsely believe that their home equity was savings, and now people are going to start to realize that they don't have any home equity. And, you know, it's unfortunate because those Americans who are being responsible and are saving, most of them are saving the wrong currency. They're saving in U.S. dollars, and they're going to find that they can buy very little with their dollars. You know, the dollar hit a new all-time record low today against the Canadian dollar. You think the Dow is up today? In every other currency in the world, it's down sharply today.
I can still buy a hot dog with $1. I don't know about you, Peter.
Well, but you need a lot more of them.
But Peter,
perhaps.
Peter, this is the government trying, in a way, to reverse that 0 or negative savings rate. And do you applaud them, or do you say this is something
We've got to do it, but, you know, that's going to bring on a recession, which we need. But, of course, the Federal Reserve is resisting. You know, by cutting interest rates and keeping interest rates below the rate of inflation, the Federal Reserve is discouraging Americans from saving. They're punishing savers. What they need to do is reward savers. We should be raising interest rates. We need to discourage people from buying houses they can't afford and buying products that they can't afford. People need to save, but we're not going to have savings when we have the most inflationary monetary policy in American history. Inflation punishes.
It's true. You know, Peter makes the point about interest rates, and certainly with CDs and as they come down, people have not certainly been encouraged to save. I mean, in the past year or so, it got better, but now it seems to be a bit in a reverse.
Well, you know, Liz, people aren't struggling to make ends meet. People are struggling to keep up with the Joneses. In other words, my friend down the block has 2 flat-panel TVs, so I need 2 flat-panel TVs. Americans are doing as well now as they've ever done. In fact, I always tell people, look at your parents, look at their parents, and look at their parents. I guarantee you 95% will say we're better off than they were. America has progressed very nicely. The flip side of this, of course, is a lot of folks are still worried about the stock market. And maybe a lot of them are listening to Peter and they're just scared to invest at all. But the reality is that so many people say, I don't want to be in the market. I'm afraid I'll lose all my money. Look at Social Security, same thing. We talk about perhaps letting people take their Social Security money, the money they've earned, and invest it into the stock market. As soon as the president brought it up, even with record approval ratings at the time, it didn't go through.
And Pat, I got to tell you, I was in England for about a month a couple of years ago. Those people don't buy anything. I mean, granted, their currency is stronger than ours, but when it comes down to what they can buy, you go into a typical home in the United States compared to Britain, we have a lot more than they do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And hold on, Peter. That's the Pat.
And somebody in Britain, because of this dollar fall, can come to the United States now and they can buy a whole slew of things that they can't buy in England because their currency is very strong.
They're coming here with empty bags and leaving with full bags.
You have to look at both sides of the issue. And if I can go back to the 401k, this is a nice balance between big government telling you what to do and also letting you opt out. If you don't like that your employer is signing you up, you just sign the opt-out form.
Point.
They're really focusing on the fact that we do not save enough for retirement. The average 401k plan has less than $80,000 in it, and who in this country can retire on $80,000?
But it's something, Pat.
It's something. You're absolutely right. But this is a step in the right direction. Nested inside these changes are also changes for the employer to get them off the hook with all of this complicated testing to see whether there's discrimination in the plan, so the top people are getting too much out of the plan versus the bottom people. This is a very good compromise to try and balance the desire to help people save a little bit more for retirement with good investment options as well.
Peter, do you know, in fact, that the salaries in England are lower than our salaries, and they have to pay twice as much for everything? I don't know if you've been to London recently, but it's more than twice as expensive as Manhattan. So, you know, they don't live better there than they do here. That's not true.
Well, the problem is here, we've been living okay, but we've been doing it with borrowed money. You know, we've been consuming a lot, but we haven't paid for these products yet. We've put it on a national charge card. We owe the world trillions of dollars plus interest. And, you know, we're going to feel the sting of that. And Charles says that Americans are living better than they ever have. You know, I can tell you, my grandfather was a carpenter, and he raised 7 children. His wife never had a job. They had a vacation home. They had a housekeeper. Kids went to college without borrowing any money.
And that's not the average guy. That is not the average guy. Your grandfather was well-to-do.
Well, not only that,
no, he wasn't. He was a carpenter.
Peter, you still make more money than he does on an inflation-adjusted basis. You know it. You know you make way more money than him. That's a great example. As great as he lived, you're living substantially better.
The average guy in this country lives substantially better than your grandfather did.
Hold on a second. I'm not talking about what I make. I make more than the average income. My grandfather was a carpenter. You know, I talk to clients. They tell me their fathers were mailmen, and their wives didn't have to work. You know, America has a much lower standard of living today, despite all of our increased technology, because of the debasement of our currency.
I have to disagree with you. I don't know what America you're talking about.
But wait, guys, we don't want this to disintegrate into a different discussion. Right. The discussion is now, you know, forcibly putting people into their 401ks as soon as they do something like that. At least then, is that then a cushion, Charles?
We need to nudge them. They need to be nudged. And I think the great point that Pat brought up was that you can opt out of it. So, okay, you're not locked in. If you don't want to be in this, you don't have to be. But I think a lot of folks are just, you know, they're static. They don't move. They don't understand.
Absolutely.
They need that little bit of nudging. This is one of the few times I think this is not necessarily Big Brother or a nanny state, but
and it's a very
something
small
that we
amount
probably
of
need
money.
to get done.
They're not signing them up for the full amount, and that's what people should be aiming at. People should be aiming at the full amount. $15,500 is the amount that someone can put in. Anyone can put into a 401k today if they make that much. And if you're over 50, you can put an extra $5,000 in. That's what we need to be doing.
All right. Little cousin instead of Big Brother, right? That's what government should be. Liz?
All right. Thanks to our panel. We'll be back with much more. And stay tuned. So if we're flying everywhere, buying iPods and iPhones, must be feeling pretty good about the American economy, right? I mean, you would think.
One would think.
Joining us now to discuss, Pat Powell of Powell Financial Group, Charles Payne, Fox Business contributor, and Peter Schiff of Euro Pacific
He's not smiling.
Capital. I know. Well, because, you know, Peter, what is the point here? If you see that people are buying all of these things, clearly isn't the consumer feeling healthy?
Well, you know, a lot of Apple's sales are coming from abroad, and, you know, they've got some innovative products. I mean, there's no question Apple's a good company. I wouldn't buy it as an investment. It's overpriced, and I think I'm with your friend Warren Buffett. Airlines are for traders. They're not for investors. But I wouldn't read anything into a few companies that are doing okay and say the U.S. economy is in good shape. I think the overwhelming evidence is that the U.S. economy is in awful shape, and the fact that consumers have spent so much is part of the problem. And the fact that they continue to spend money and they're borrowing
Peter, what would your definition of a good economy be? Because right now I feel like I'm in bizarro land every time I'm on the show with you. You know, the economy's doing great. The stock market reflects that. Look, 4.7% unemployment. Okay, thank you. Answer it.
Charles, I'll answer your question. The economies that are doing well are the ones that are generating all the savings that we're borrowing and that are producing all the goods that we're consuming.
So let's take China, for instance. Let me take China, for instance. They have $2.2 trillion in savings, and they're getting all of our money. Would you switch places? Would you rather live in China right now than in America?
Good question.
Well, I would certainly rather invest there. I'm pouring my money over there. And if you actually stop to take a look, for the past 5 years, since the 2002 lows, has been the worst performing stock market in the world by a factor of more than 2.
Pat, hold on a second, gang. Pat, we got to put a button on this. Isn't it true that the Chinese stock market, which has been going through the roof, is kind of a gambit? Even Steve Forbes, who's big on China, says he wouldn't go into the Chinese stock market because it's a pyramid scheme.
Absolutely. It's in the very formative stages. We don't really know how China is going to pan out. China's doing an economic experiment that has never been done before. It is pairing capitalism with communism. And
most of the companies on the Chinese market have either a direct or indirect relationship with the government. They're linked at the hip to the government.
So we don't know how all this is going to happen. People who like saying it's so big we can't avoid it. There are much more interesting economies out there.
By the way, if we added up China's economy, Russia's economy, and Brazil's economy, it still wouldn't equal America. And I got to tell you, this is like January 1929. It's a fun party over there. I trade the Chinese market. I would trade them, not airline stocks, but
the bank on it either.
Feisty. We love it. This is just the kind of conversation. Peter, hold on there. We've got much more.
Well, just a few